Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. This is the first of our 3 clinic overview sessions this week. It's great to see all of the attendees here today. Today is our transactional day. So we're going to showcase the 4 transactional clinics here at the law school. Before we do that, well, let me do one thing here. To change the setting. All right, I promised that in this session, we would also share some information about how you sign up for clinics in the fall. And so let me try to do that by just dropping it into the chat. The language I have here is in bullet points, so I don't know what's going to happen in the chat with bullets. Let's find out. All right, et voila. All right, so that's the basic rules for how you sign up for clinics. We're happy to take questions about that in the Q&A, but I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it. And I'd rather use our time for the substantive presentations. So we're going to have 4 clinics presenting. We're going to first hear from the Corporate Lab Clinic, then the Institute for Justice Clinic on Entrepreneurship, then the Innovation Clinic, and then finally the Housing Initiative Transactional Clinic. So let's see. I think we'll hear from each clinic for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. I'm going to turn it over now to the Corporate Lab Clinic.
Thank you, Jeff. David, are you on or no?
Yeah, I am. I think we're going to turn this over to Matthew and Jessica, and they can introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matthew, and Jessica is also on. We're both in the corporate lab, and we're going to be student directors next year, so we're going to be with the program for another year. We're just going to talk through some slides that we have, which hopefully we can get up. There they go. There they are. Just to talk about our experience in the lab and some of the things that we've really enjoyed about it, and then have our contact information at the end. If you have any further questions for us, feel free to reach out to us in our email or wherever you find most helpful. So I think the thing that's the most valuable about the lab and that I've found really beneficial is that I think it really does replicate a general corporate practice, and the amount of work that you get that really does, all of your work is focused on real client issues. All of your work is going to be relatively varied, which is really nice. We see all kinds of different things, like from contract drafting to memos. So you get a good mix of litigation and contractual, kind of more traditionally thought of as transactional experience. So it's a really good mix of things that you would encounter in a corporate practice. And that's one of the things that I've found really interesting about the lab, and that I think is something to consider as you're looking for clinics. And by the way, just as a general matter, definitely do a clinic. It's definitely one of the biggest pros of my law school experience so far, so I would highly recommend it. And if you have any doubts, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to chat with you more about that. So what do you do? Basically, the lab is structured in the following way. So you're going to work in a small team under the supervision of a student director, and then there are several teams underneath Professor Zarfis and Aberton. So it's a sort of basically a 3-level structure, and you're going to manage relationships with several clients whom you're going to have a relationship with throughout the course of the program, and they're going to span industries. They're going to range in size from a startup that is really new and has some kind of interesting contractual issues, and they're just trying to get off the ground, to a Fortune 100 company that's got much more sophisticated legal problems and doesn't need their hand held in any way, and they want the answer quickly, which is a really nice mix. I think something that's really, really nice that I've particularly enjoyed is being able to participate in client calls, and that's something that has tested me to become a better and more articulate speaker, and to really learn how to lead a call, and to show and to really demonstrate to your client that you know what you're talking about, and that they can trust you with their problem. And you're going to submit work product as well, which is going to be standard, I would imagine, across the clinics. So you're going to have assignments like memos or contract drafting or what have you. And those things are going to be submitted to clients after they go through a review process. And that's something I do want to spend a little bit of time on, just to note that you're going to have a lot of opportunities to receive feedback regarding your work, both from your peers and from your student director and from the professors. So there are a lot of different ways for you to receive substantive feedback on your work and a lot of ways for you to improve. And given that the lab is graded independently each quarter, if you have a bad quarter your first quarter, you always can kind of turn it around in your next quarter by taking some of the feedback you've received in the previous quarter and really changing the way that you approach things. So you have more of an opportunity to do that, given that the grading is independent, at least as far as I understand. And then you also have the opportunity to see some leadership opportunities. So this will include the team lead role, which is you're going to work very closely with your student director to make sure work is allocated relatively evenly and to make sure everybody's doing all right, maybe give a first pass on projects for revisions and suggestions for other members of your team and collaborating with them. And also being able to lead client calls. So whether or not you're a team lead or whether you're just a member of your team, you have the opportunity to participate in a client call. If you're leading a project with your client, you'll come in with questions and comments or whatever your findings have been on the project and share those with the client. I'll turn it over to Jessica now to talk a little more about who our clients are and stuff like that.
Hi guys, as Matthew said, I'm Jessica, and we have here a couple more specifics on the things that we do. You can see that our clients are really varied. Like you said, they can go from startups. So my team this year worked with a startup from Booth all the way up to a Fortune 100 company, and they span across industries. So you see here, we have everything from like retail to manufacturing to healthcare. And I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about Corporate Lab, just the fact that these clients have such varied needs. It's very interesting to see how they're involved with the different business models at issue. And here you have a list of sample projects of things that you could be working on. So for example, we have things that range from analyzing an employee handbook and proposing suggestions based on new statutes to creating a PowerPoint that the general counsel could use to present to a board of directors. You can see that the work product is, it's generally, I think there's a memo involved in a lot of different projects, but that's not always the case. And the things I've done that are not memos, like PowerPoints and state surveys, I've had a lot of fun practicing my creativity. Like, what should this look like? And how do I communicate this information in a way that's understandable and the client will want? Beyond client work, there's a series of things that we do within the Corporate Lab. So for example, we have a speaker series every week or so. They'll bring in practicing attorneys or business leaders. Like we've had partners from Kirkland come in to talk about their practice group, recent trends that they've been seeing, and what it's like to work in the industry. Also in the fall, we have a mock cross-border negotiation exercise. Last year, or this past year, it was with a team from Tel Aviv. I participated in it and it was really fun. It works a lot of muscles that I think during your 1L you don't really get to use as much. And then also in the winter, we have a second negotiation module. And this time we had Kirkland and Ellis attorneys come in and sort of give us tips on how to talk to the other side and the points we wanted to bring up and the things that we found of value to mention. So that's it from us. If anyone has any questions, this is our contact information. Please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. David, Josh, anything to add to that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. So thank you.
Terrific.
Thank you, Matthew and Jessica.
So let's hold questions for the end. We should have plenty of time for a Q&A. So let me turn it over next to our IJ Clinic on entrepreneurship.
Hello, everybody. Happy Monday of the, well, I don't know if it's last week for one else, so I shouldn't say anything about that. But I'm Beth Krieger. I'm the director of the IJ Clinic on Entrepreneurship. And we have just celebrated 20 years at the clinic. at the law school, we are part of the Institute for Justice, which is a national public interest law firm. And we are lawyers for low-income entrepreneurs in Chicago. And we view that role as lawyers broadly, where the student teams are really kind of the general counsel, handling the wide range of legal issues for our clients. And we take our clients oftentimes for years. So it's a really close relationship, and it's a strong bond between our students and our clients. But not only are we transactional and regulatory counsel for our clients, but we really consider ourselves advocates and a watchdog for low-income entrepreneurs, and a general kind of booster and support for them. So we have events and participate in legislative advocacy and lobbying and policy work to make Chicago and Illinois a friendlier place for low-income entrepreneurs. And that takes a whole variety of forms. You can learn more about our clinic by checking out our website, which is ijclinic.org. We have a video there that you can click on and check out if you want to learn more. Here's just a little view of that website, and you can see the play button there. The big picture there is one of my favorite clients of all time, but I say that about everybody. The fellow in the middle there is a carpenter who named William Tanksley, who usually went by Tank. So that's a place you can go to learn more about our clients. But I also wanted to just tell you a story of one of our clients so that you could get a feel for what it is students are doing and what it is we, the clinic, are doing on a day-to-day basis, and why we're doing it, because we are mission driven to make sure that low-income entrepreneurs, that folks with big dreams and teeny tiny budgets are really free to kind of pursue their dreams and their passions. So I put up a picture of Myra and Jesse. They're longtime friends from the neighborhood of Back of the Yards. And here's a little Chicago trivia for you. That neighborhood abutted the stockyards in Chicago, which used to be the source of a lot of working class jobs in the city, a lot of smells in the city as well. And the neighborhood took its name from that. The stockyards are gone, and that neighborhood is redefining itself. It's got a great, vibrant Latino community, but not as many jobs as they need. Jesse and Myra went away to college, and by away, they went to UIC, so in Chicago. So they didn't go far, but they discovered there that part of the city was a totally different environment. And they fell in love with the community coffee shop. They realized what an asset it was to a neighborhood to have that place where people could gather, and people could work both in jobs in the coffee shop, but also work on the projects that they had going on and really connect with people. So they decided to really try to get a coffee shop, a community coffee shop like that in their own neighborhood at Back of the Yards where they grew up. They gathered statistics about what a coffee culture exists in Mexican American communities, tried to convince the big name coffee houses to come. They couldn't get anybody to set up shop in Back of the Yards, and eventually they decided to do it themselves. They became clients of the IJ Clinic because they participated in an annual event we have, which is called Southside Pitch. That's one of the ways that we really try to shine a light on innovation and entrepreneurship in the South Side of Chicago. And they were one of our finalists one year, and we were so impressed and awed by their entrepreneurial spirit and their community ethic that we took them on as a client. Didn't hurt that they had plenty of legal issues for us to dig our teeth into. And so the students who've been working with Back of the Yards have worked on a wide variety things, including their lease negotiations, which have gotten tense, decisions about what it means to employ people, whether they're independent contractors, whether they're employees, how does that relationship work? What is the relationship between Myra and Jesse? They founded this business together and set it up before they had lawyers. There's lots that goes into setting up that relationship between co-founders, and all sorts of decisions and agreements have to be reached about who gets what and who puts in what, and what the future of that business will hold and how they will make decisions about that together or separately. So when you talk about being general counsel for a business, the students have been in serious, intense, emotional meetings with these founders, trying to figure out how they will chart a course for their future together and for the business's future. They've talked about new locations and what the relationship would be between the entity that they started with and maybe a new location, maybe a new entity, maybe several new entities. So creating that map of relationships and corporate structures has taken up a lot of creativity and thought as well. And then we reach the current moment where they're, of course, told they can't have customers sitting in the shop. The financial stress is hitting everybody across the board. And in the IJ clinic, we've been working kind of double time during the last few months to make sure that we were providing information not only for our clients like Back of the Yards Coffee House, but for people all over the city. And so just for an example there, we just on Friday submitted a comment letter to the SBA critiquing the rules that they put in place to regulate the PPP loans, those Paycheck Protection Program loans. I'm sure lots of you heard about how trillions of dollars were set aside for these small business loans and they were gone within days. So two of the rules that we took objection to, given what all we've learned about our clients and their businesses, were one, a rule that said people with kind of recent interaction with the criminal justice system could not be eligible for loans. That was not in the law, but the SBA added that in the rules. And two, to get the loan forgiven, which is crucial for so many businesses, business has to spend 75% of it on payroll. Well, for a small business with a location like Back of the Yards, that balance is completely off. They have to spend as much on rent and utilities to stay open as they do on payroll, so that they can keep 6 jobs going in a neighborhood that really needs jobs. So we're able to participate in those policy conversations at the city, state, and federal level as well, given our intimate knowledge of the clients that we serve, that we admire so much, and students are involved in every single aspect of that work. So I think that's my time, and I'll pass it on to the next clinic.
Thank you, Beth. Our next clinic is the Innovation Clinic.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Underwood. I'm the director of the Innovation Clinic. I'll tell you a little bit about us, and then I will hand it over to a couple of students to give some testimonials. So let's see if I can share this. All right, so there we go. All right, so my goals for students that participate in the Innovation Clinic, first and foremost, is to expose students to the tech and venture capital ecosystem. So we are a clinic that represents exclusively high growth startups and venture capital firms, which frankly have a set of priorities and considerations that really make them fundamentally different from traditional small businesses. And so for anyone who's looking to get into this space after graduation in any way, it's good to have that hands-on experience in this industry before you go into it for real. In particular, as the name of the clinic suggests, we focus on innovations. So we're looking to represent companies that are doing something really new and different, and who are encountering a regulatory scheme that they may not comfortably square with what they're proposing to bring to market. So if you think of the Uber, Airbnb 10, 15, 20 years ago, that's our ideal client. I hope people develop substantive skills in the clinic. So in addition to learning about this ecosystem where high growth startups are operating, I hope people learn how to obviously have really strong contract drafting skills, contract analysis skills, learning how to coach a client through diligence is a big thing that we do here, and prepare for the diligence process that they may have to undertake when they go to raise their Series A or similar. You know, really things that like research and writing, putting in the theory of what you learn in class into the practice of client work. But there's also a lot of soft skills that you'll develop. So as the students will attest, there's a lot of client interaction in the innovation clinic, and learning how to be client ready is getting more and more important as law firms and other service providers that you might work for in the future start interviewing our students. They care more and more about whether they could put someone in front of a client on day one and be confident that you would know how to deal with that situation. So a lot of client readiness, a lot of project management. We're typically working on many different things at one time. Professionalism, deal flow management, things like that, preparing for a good client interview, all the kinds of things that go in, or the intangibles that go into making a really great lawyer. One thing I've realized sort of leading the clinic for the last couple of years is that not everyone who takes the clinic is looking to work at a major law firm that does this kind of work. A lot of you are looking to go straight to working for a VC, or you're going to work for your own startup. And so we're sort of agnostic to that. I think this is a great experience for any student, regardless of the angle at which you're approaching this industry after you graduate. In terms of the work that we do, you know, I'm sort of characterizing this on these slides as what we do for the entrepreneurs and startups versus what we do for venture capital firms. That's probably a false way to split it up, because the work sort of bleeds over. There's a lot of times where venture capital firms are asking us to do work for their portfolio companies, and a lot of times where portfolio companies are asking us to do the kind of work we usually do for VCs. So that distinction isn't really as important. The primary thing to take away from this is that we're very broad transactionally and from a regulatory perspective. So that's the kind of work that we're doing. Where do our clients come from? They're sort of all over the United States. A good amount of them are in Chicago, but we're sort of expanding those horizons to include more and more companies that are in the Bay Area or elsewhere. We also represent a lot of NVC or SNVC teams, booth students who are starting their own companies, companies in the Polsky Accelerator, Innovation Fund, companies that are eligible for funding in the finals, alumni of both the law school and a booth, my personal network of friends. So we have a lot of different pipelines of clients coming from a lot of places. We're also industry agnostic, so we will work with startups or venture capital firms in any industry, so long as they're doing something interesting and innovative. So in the past 18 months since I've been here, we've worked in 3D printing, nuclear energy, criminal law, sports, entertainment, medical devices, insurance, cryptocurrency, food and beverage, retail, professional services, telehealth, and the list sort of goes on. So we are a master of the startup work and kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to being a chameleon in our industry. In terms of, so that's sort of an overview of the client work, and my students will tell you more about that kind of work that we do when they speak. So there's the client work, which is all transactional and regulatory work. During our class time, we do a lot of different things. So I have a minimum 2-quarter commitment for the clinic. So you have to be in the clinic for at least 2 consecutive quarters. During the first quarter, most of our class time is spent on lectures and doing case rounds. So during lectures, you'll learn about a lot of substantive topics that you will need to know in order to represent the startups and venture capital firms appropriately. So that would be things like those that are listed on this slide. And then in the second quarter, as we have students who are repeating and you're sort of up to speed and really getting into the nitty-gritty of your projects, we do a lot more different things. So we'll do simulations. We did a simulation where some people in the class were the clients and some people in the class were the lawyers. One side was a VC fund, the other side was the startup, and you had to negotiate the Series A. So people got the experience of occupying many of those different roles. We also do a project for Polsky companies where we will sort of do mock diligence for them as if we were the venture capital financing source, to sort of let them know what are some red flags in their diligence that they need to correct, what's a better way to organize themselves to prepare for diligence. That gives students a really good flavor for the kinds of documents that you might see as you encounter diligence in real life, and also for the documents that they might have to draft as they continue on in the clinic. They also then assist those companies in rectifying any problems we've identified. So it's a really good holistic exercise. And then of course, case rounds, which is where we kind of all share notes and lessons that we've learned from projects that are ongoing so that we can, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. And those who aren't working on that project can leverage the experience of students who are. So some other reasons that you might want to join the Innovation Clinic. For one, you're working with entrepreneurs who are incredibly smart in the deep tech and the things that they do. A lot of them have many different degrees. They're PhDs in kinds of, you know, biological sciences that I don't even understand if I read the abstract of a paper, but they don't really know a lot about law. And so it's a really good opportunity for students to learn and also learn with the client. And, you know, you learn a lot by repeating it back. And if you can explain it, that's kind of the litmus test for whether you've really understood it. So there's a lot of that that's going on with these clients who really don't have any background in this whatsoever. It's a really small class size, so we only have 10 people in the Innovation Clinic. So that means a lot of individualized feedback from me. Connections across the Midway, so we do a lot with Polsky and Booth. We do a lot with the Rostandi Center. So for those of you who are looking to really get some access to those programs, we're there all the time. We also take our projects on a project by project basis. So instead of acting as general counsel for our clients, we might say to them, yes, we'll draft your terms of service and privacy policy, but no, we won't do this huge piece of regulatory research. So that really allows every student to kind of tailor the experience to what they're looking to get out of it. You know, if you're looking to get a certain kind of project or in a certain kind of industry, that opportunity will be there. And then a lot of our students have gone on to work full-time for the startups that they worked for during the school year, or the venture capital firms that they worked with during the school year, either over the summer or after graduation. We've also had a lot of job opportunities come our way just sort of organically. And so that's been a nice way to network with firms in this space who sort of act as third-party attorneys, counseling us on some things that are maybe outside of our comfort zone, given that we are so broad in terms of our industry experience. You'll have a mix of some solo work and some team projects. Some projects will be small things that you can knock out in a week. Some things will go on for a couple of quarters or an entire calendar year. It kind of just depends on what the client brings to us. And I think at this point, I will hand it over to my two students, Erin and Nick, to give a little insight as to what their experience has been like.
Thanks, Emily. So I'll talk a little bit about the sort of process that we go through at the Innovation Clinic and what that looks like from a student perspective. This clinic has been a really, really fun experience throughout this last year that I've been a part of it, and maybe more importantly, has been a really great learning experience as well. So like Emily said, the clinic experience sort of starts with lectures throughout the first quarter that you're a part of it, that walk you through some of the fundamentals that you sort of need to understand in order to be able to draft the kinds of agreements and do the kind of regulatory work that becomes required in the clinic. And as you move into taking on projects, Emily does a really, really good job of assembling a very wide variety of projects that you can work on. And that's not only from a legal perspective of it, you know, spanning all kinds of agreements or entity formation or, you know, IP protections or privacy policies or just, you know, sort of regulatory research, but also the sort of business aspect to it, which is because we are working with these startups that are innovating in their space, you see lots and lots of companies that are doing things that are really interesting and sort of cutting edge with technology we haven't heard of, or trying to do something that actually is really potentially going to change the world. And the really cool thing about it is that you're working with these people from the ground up. They tend to be, you know, relatively young founders that have these ideas and visions. And at the time they're working with the clinic, it might be one person, 2 or 3 people. And you're actually helping form these companies or work on these sort of core agreements that almost make or break the company, because it's going to be the things that they take to work with their first partners, or it's going to be pertaining to the core governance of the company that you're working with. And so it's not only work that's super practical and useful to know, but it actually makes a really, really big impact. And I've seen many of these founders that we work with be really, really grateful for the work that the Innovation Clinic does, because, you know, oftentimes they don't have the money to go to a non-pro bono place and actually get quality work done for them. So being able to see that impact is also really nice. And again, the variety lets you as a student choose kind of what you want to work on and do things that are of interest to you, and then eventually work on a pretty wide variety of things so that you get a really good practical understanding of each of the different sort of agreements you might work on in this space. So once you've sort of selected a project, it sort of starts out with these initial client meetings. And this gives you sort of a business understanding of what the problem is from the client's perspective and what their thoughts are on, you know, how they want to form the company or this particular agreement, what their use case is, practically what's the business purpose they're trying to solve. And you have to then go through a thought experiment and conceptual exercise where you bring in your sort of legal background, and of course, you know, working with Emily here to work out what is the best way to actually answer those business questions, but keep it sort of legally sound and sort of bring it to the real world where we sort of have a lot of precedent to work off of and understand how things have historically done. So it's this balancing act of staying close to the things that we know work well, but then also answering these business sort of more strategic, high level points that the entrepreneurs are trying to actually create. And that's the reason that people form agreements and, you know, work with law firms, is because they have a business goal in mind and they sort of need a means of carrying that out that is legally sound. So that side of it gives you kind of an entrepreneurial spirit where you're sort of thinking through these problems and thinking about everything from a business perspective, which you don't get in a lot of, especially the 1L classes. And then as you move into the actual drafting of contracts or regulatory research, you're then sort of forced to learn how to combine the conceptual stuff that you've been learning in contracts, for example, with the practical application of drafting these agreements. And that sounds really daunting, and it did initially, but just because of the way the clinic is structured, all of this is a really iterative process. And Emily is really, really good about working with you, and, you know, you're meeting with her once a week, twice a week, whatever it may be, to be able to create really solid work product. And the things that you would think early on in clinic, I have no idea how to do, no idea how to tackle. You know, I think what I learned in contracts was really conceptual, kind of gets brought into the practical realm. And that becomes kind of something I think that you take with you anywhere you're going to go, whether it be to a law firm, to starting a company, to working in corporate in-house counsel. I mean, even if you left legal practice entirely and went somewhere else, this sort of thought process where you have to combine business and legal and put things into practice that are more conceptual is really useful. And it kind of spans not only the spaces we work with, but I think anywhere you're going to go and work in. And again, it's a very, you know, it's a small clinic. And so the work you get to do is very hands-on. It's very your own. And I think what you can get out of it is then really, really great, because you can put in some level of effort and directly see the result of it. You basically get the contract that you thought of from scratch from a business standpoint, and you then worked through, tied in the, you know, conceptual stuff that you understood, and then you're going and handing it to this founder. And of course, you're working with them throughout in this process, and they're then going and using it when they're forming the company or going to partners or signing a fundraising deal with a major VC, and I think that's really cool. And it's been a really fun experience to be a part of, and I'm super glad to have taken it. So I would definitely encourage other people to do the same. And Aaron, if you have any other thoughts.
Sure. I just wanted to emphasize that that the clinic is amazing, and one of the things that's greatest about it is just that there's an incredible breadth of projects that you get to work on, and that you get to exercise different types of skills on. It's really the intersection of, you know, business and law, and particularly cutting edge business. So we're really like, you know, walking into these waters where like the law is just not cut up to at a particular moment, and that can be really intriguing on a conceptual level. And I would also just say that Emily is like particularly incredible at imparting skills that we can use for interacting with clients. There are different types of client communications or interactions. There's a certain type of way you should write an email, and how much information an email should contain, and how it should be written, and how it should be drafted. There's a different type of process involved with calling up a client, and there are different times when doing an email versus doing a client phone call might be called for, and all of that is part of the strategy. Of being a good lawyer, I should say, and you really develop that here. And I would also just say that you really get an exposure to, I guess, the interests of these new emerging businesses and like how they form. And, you know, everything is kind of like new at the startup stage. It's not only like what the startup business will eventually be, but it will also be how the startup is thinking about the product that it's making. And you as a lawyer are kind of there during those early processes and can kind of, through your legal analysis, what can be green lighted, what can't be green lighted, what's kind of yellow lighted. You know, you kind of are there at those stages and helping your client out. And that's pretty exciting. And that's it.
Great, thank you all. Well, our last one to talk about is the one that I direct. It's the Housing Initiative Transactional Clinic. So this is a community development clinic, and one that's focused on working on deals. The issues that we work on are kind of at the intersection of homelessness and neighborhood change. Our clients are looking to produce affordable housing, and they're worried about the effects of gentrification and displacement on families who have been in their neighborhoods for a long time. So our work, we represent nonprofit affordable housing developers who are doing new construction or rehab of properties to create new affordable housing in the Chicago metro area. As I mentioned, we're focused on deals, and the clinic is meant to give students exposure to a kind of activity that occurs throughout transactional practice. So our projects, you know, they start with a term sheet or a business negotiation. Then there's some preliminary legal documents that are drafted. Those documents get negotiated. There's a due diligence period, and then there's a closing. The kinds of projects that we work on are a big range. So we've got some clients that are doing even single family rehabs that might be a $50,000 budget. And then on the other end of the spectrum are some very large projects, like our public housing transformation deals where the budget's in the tens of millions of dollars. In those projects, we're working on things like purchase and sale agreements, leasing agreements, you know, agreements having to do with the acquisition and disposition of land. We're working on construction financing. Many of our projects utilize the federal low-income housing tax credit program, which is the biggest subsidy program for affordable housing. That brings in some investor equity into the deals. So we're working on limited partnership agreements and operating agreements for limited liability companies to bring that equity in. And then there's kind of more traditional loan financing, secured transactions. So we're working on loan agreements and mortgages, promissory notes, those kinds of agreements. Another kind of bucket of our work has to do with nonprofit corporate governance. We are representing nonprofits, and they come to us from time to time with issues related to their own internal functioning. So we draft bylaws, articles of incorporation. And I would say nonprofit governance, you know, the advice you give is like every other corporate governance, right? It's governed by the same kinds of legal principles and background laws. But then it also has a heavy tax overlay. Most of our clients are 501c3 tax exempt organizations, and there's a fairly complex set of IRS guidance that they need to follow, particularly when they're joint venturing with for-profit developers. So folks who are interested in tax and that kind of regulatory overlay and the effect of regulation on transactional work, this is a good clinic to get some of that exposure. And then last, we have a component of our work that's policy related. And that changes from time to time. Most recently, we've been working on issues related to local property tax at the very local level, at the Cook County level. And then also looking at ways of increasing financing opportunities for housing cooperatives. And much of that work has been around researching and then starting conversations with local officials and local banking community. So that's the broad overview. We do have some materials on our website you can look at later. There's a couple of short videos and whatnot. But let me turn it over now to our student, Will Reeves, who's been in the clinic. Will, you started as the summer after your 1L year, and you've stuck with it all this time. You're graduating in a few weeks, so congrats to you, and take it away, Will.
Yeah, like Jeff said, my name is Will. I've worked in the housing clinic for the past couple of years. I think in addition to what Jeff offered in terms of an overview, one of the things that's unique about the housing clinic is that a lot of the work that we do is happening right in our backyard. It's development projects that are on the south and west sides of Chicago primarily. And so a unique aspect to this clinic is that, you know, we get to work with and see our clients. I think most students in the clinic have had the opportunity to go and visit the offices of our clients. And as some of the other clinics have mentioned, we're working with groups that need work and can't otherwise afford legal counsel. And so we're always greeted with, you know, gratitude and food and hugs. And it's a really cool and rewarding aspect of this work that I think the housing clinic offers in particular. Additionally, I would say in terms of the work that we do, as Jeff mentioned, the work's really diverse. So if you're somebody who is business organizations oriented and you like drawing boxes on paper and rearranging them, there's that work to be done. If you like complex financing structures, there's that work to be done. Or if you're more policy and advocacy oriented, there's research projects, presentations at community events, and Jeff is great about tailoring the work to what you want. There's input given at the beginning of every quarter about the sort of projects you've liked and haven't liked, and what you're interested in doing in the transactional and housing space. So that's one thing I've enjoyed. Lastly, I would just add, I think one of the ways that I found that I learn best, and I think a lot of people learn best, is just from watching somebody do their job well. And so I think the up close nature of sort of watching Jeff take the lead as an attorney in handling difficult client matters or difficult client questions is really valuable, just to see how somebody who's done it for a long time takes phone calls or sends emails. I think that's an invaluable aspect of the clinic that I don't think we can get in any other classes. So I think if you're interested in transactional work, the housing clinic will make you very comfortable with contracts, contract skills in terms of being careful and precise about drafting and interpreting. You get direct feedback. The supervision is great, and the work that we do is really diverse and really rewarding as well. So it's been one of, if not the best component of my law school experience. And so I'd highly recommend housing clinic to anybody who's interested.
Thank you, Will, and thanks to all of our presenters. Now we'd like to open it up to your questions, and I'm happy to continue to play the role of MC. If you would raise your blue hand. I see Evan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when do you recommend that that students start their clinic experience? Is that something that you all recommend for 2L year, 3L year, or in what quarter as well?
So I can start. I think most of the clinics are open to 2Ls and 3Ls, but it is a bit of a varied regime. We're able, when we open up seats for registration, we're able to specify whether the seats are open to 3Ls or 2Ls or either one. So there'll be some kind of fine-grained detail in the registration materials when you sign up. But we encourage students to get involved, as early as they wish to. I think we find many students coming out of 1L year are hungry for some more practical applications of what they've been learning. So we certainly encourage students to sign up 2L year. Most of the seats will open up in the fall. There are more limited number of seats in the winter and spring. The bulk of the seats open up in the fall.
I'll just add a couple more points there. I think the University of Chicago clinics do allow a variety of kind of structures to your clinic time. So it is kind of a nice feature at our law school that you can kind of be in a clinic for a couple years at a low level of credit. So that's something to really consider, that you can really make it a part of your law school experience over those 2 years and develop the kind of experience and client relationships and leadership within that clinic that only comes, I think, with time. Some client matters stretch over a long time, so that's a way for you to see something start to finish. Of course, that varies clinic to clinic. So that's something to keep in the mix as you're thinking that through. I've heard from students coming out of the summer associate gig after second year that they really felt prepared because they had seen things in clinic and gotten some practice in clinic and had some feedback in clinic that meant that they were kind of ahead of the game when they got those summer assignments. So that's yet another kind of, I think, plus factor for starting during the second year.
Emily, I think you mentioned in your presentation that the Innovation Clinic is set at 1 year participation. Is that right?
Yeah, so, and that's only because we had such a wait list and I wanted to free up seats. I might do something where I let a couple of students continue for a second year, provided that they have, enough credit space available under the overarching clinical rules. But yeah, right now, minimum 2 consecutive quarters, maximum 3 absent instructor consent.
And how about, would any of the corporate lab presenters like to address this point for the corporate lab?
We operate the same way. We require 2 quarters. We have an option for 3.
And I'll say for the housing initiative, it's really unregulated. I do encourage students to be in for at least 2 quarters. I think they get more out of it if they're in for a little bit longer than 1 quarter. But then I do have students who stay on and are welcome to participate for longer than, for multiple quarters, even as long as 2 years.
And part of the reason I do that, by the way, I forgot to mention this before, is that in the second quarter, that also allows us, if I don't have any new students for 1 quarter, that allows us to do things like site visits. So we went to go visit Sandbox Industries in the winter quarter this year. We went to go visit Ascent RegTech downtown, which is stuff that's harder to do when you have new students every quarter.
It's probably worth mentioning that all the clinics have a classroom component that goes along with the live client work. And the way those classroom components are structured can vary across clinics. So it's important to check out the course description for the clinic to see kind of what the lay of the land is. For the housing clinic, we have a seminar component that's 2 hours in the fall. New students come for both hours, but returning students only come for the second hour, which is more geared towards case rounds. And then in the winter and spring, we drop down to 1 hour a week and focus more on the case rounds. the idea being that we'll front load more of the didactic instruction in the fall quarter. And I imagine our other clinics have made similar moves in how they structure their classroom components. Beth, do you want to explain how that works for IJ?
Sure. So we do have the classroom component. What we've done is usually met for about an hour and a half, and usually every other week. So we meet throughout the year. We mix up some simulations, some discussion of legal issues that are common to many of our clients. With guest speakers, we just heard last week from the chief kind of policy advisor for the mayor about what's been happening in regard to small businesses in Chicago. So we do a variety of different things in that time, but we try to balance a little class time and togetherness with the hours that students are spending on their clients.
And Emily, how about for the Innovation Clinic? Is it consistent throughout the year, or is it vary by quarter?
Vary by quarter, so very similar to the Housing Initiative Transactional Clinic. So we, in the fall, which is when I typically have the most new students, we're doing a lot of lecture and case rounds on substantive topics to get people up to speed. And then in the second quarter, we continue to hold class 2 hours every week, but what we're doing with that time will be very different. So sometimes it's site visits to clients or under other industry professionals or guest speakers. Other times it'll be simulations. This quarter, I had each student pick a current topic in venture capital law. And so each person did a 10 or 15-minute presentation on a current topic of interest to them. So we have a little more flexibility in the second quarter to do more case rounds and discussion-oriented activities, as opposed to the more, as Jeff said, didactic instruction. And then spring, we kind of play fast and loose depending on how many returning versus new students we have.
And for our corporate lab presenters, I know you mentioned the speaker series. That's part of your part of the classroom component. Tell us about how it works in the corporate lab.
So I would say it's pretty consistent across quarters in terms of how work and presentations look. So we almost always have speakers coming in every quarter. We have a few every quarter. Work is always flowing, but the pace can vary by quarter, and I'm sure the professors can say more about on that front. But by and large, it's going to look pretty similar each quarter. But you will have a couple special things. So for example, we did a cross-border negotiation in the fall, which was really interesting. But we didn't then do that in the winter and spring. We just did that in the fall. So those kinds of opportunities will sort of spring up. And then we did negotiations in the winter. So those are opportunities that will come and go. But the workload and the client interactions and the speaker series will stay relatively constant. And the one other thing I did want to add, Evan, I know you mentioned like which quarter to start in. I mean, just sort of my perspective on that. I started in the fall, and I really enjoyed that because I wound up with a really great team and we worked really well together, and being able to work with them throughout the whole year was really nice, and I really enjoyed that. But that's just one person's view.
Great. Any final questions from the group? We're close to the end of our time. Anything we haven't addressed? If not, then we can break. Thank you all for joining us. I know if you have any follow-up questions, please do feel free to reach out to any of the presenters today. So thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.